Welcome to The Straight Stitch, a podcast about sewing and other fiber arts. This is episode 133, and my name is Janet Szabo. I'll be your guide as we explore all things sewing. You may have noticed that there was no podcast last week. I actually recorded it, but I didn't get it posted. And part of the reason I didn't get it posted was because our church was hosting a bike tour for 65 cyclists, and I was in charge of feeding them 3 meals a day for 4 days. I recorded this episode last week, and I should have scheduled it ahead of time, but with everything else that was going on, I forgot to do that, and then Tuesday morning came and I had to be at the church at 5 a.m. to have breakfast ready by 7 for all these people. So you're going to get last week's episode today. My apologies, but sometimes life gets in the way, and this was a big event, and I knew that it was probably going to interfere with everything else that I needed to get done, or maybe interfere isn't the best word. It was going to take over everything else that needed to get done. And I actually said to my husband at the beginning of the week, I said, just pretend like I'm out of town this week, because that's about how much you're going to see me. The bike tour went very well. Everybody was well fed and enjoyed themselves. And now we can put that behind us and move on to some other things and hopefully get back to sewing. The bike tour was a fundraiser for Mennonite Central Committee, and we were raising money for Ukraine. Our church has some very strong connections to Ukraine, and we wanted that to be the focus of our fundraising efforts. But I came into my office to record a podcast episode for this coming Tuesday and discovered that I still had last week's that hadn't been posted. So I will go ahead and get this one edited and put together and get it up for the first Tuesday in August. I just want to remind my listeners, and especially those in the Pacific Northwest, that I am teaching at Quilting Mayhem in Snohomish, Washington on September 3rd and 4th. I will be doing 2 fitting classes on September 3rd, that's a Thursday, and 2 knitting classes on Friday the 4th. So if you're in that area or you feel like traveling up there, it's a great store. So I hope to see you there. Just before I started getting ready for the bike tour, the advanced copy of Fitopedia arrived in my mailbox. And this is a fabulous book put together by Sarah Mee Duffy. And I interviewed Sarah Mee several months ago on the podcast, so I will put a link to that episode in the show notes. But Sarah Mee has done a fabulous job with the first volume of Fitopedia. And one of the items on my to-do list this afternoon is to sit down and give it a thorough perusal. You will get my thoughts about it, and they're all going to be positive, trust me. And hopefully we might even have Sarah Mee back on the podcast in the future to talk about what went into doing this book and what plans she has for the future. And now let's get into today's podcast episode. When I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, it occurred to me that this is the time of year when we really ought to be thinking about the handmade Christmas gifts that we want to make. Waiting until October or November is not a good plan. And ask me how I know that. I always think, I'll have plenty of time to work on handmade gifts after gardening season is over and after canning season is over, and it just doesn't work that way. The time to start thinking about those kinds of projects is now in the middle of the summer. So I'm going to go through a list and just talk about potential projects you could make, and where I have done some of these, I will give you my ideas and my suggestions. I don't know that there are going to be comprehensive show notes For this episode, I just may not have time to compile all of these, but certainly a quick Pinterest query or Google search will no doubt give you just as many ideas as I have here, if not more. I've broken this down into 4 categories. So we have quick gifts, scrap-friendly gifts, batch sewing gifts or production sewing gifts, and weekend projects. So let's go through each of those categories one at a time and see what we can find. So under the quick gifts category, the projects that I like are cord organizers, especially for people who travel. Do you have a zipper bag full of, or maybe just a plastic Ziploc bag, that's what my husband uses, of cords that need to be corralled? Those little cord organizers are great quick gifts to make. And obviously, some of these projects can fit into more than one category, but the cord organizers that I've seen either have snaps on them or they utilize Velcro, but they're intended to wrap around your cords once you've coiled them up to keep them corralled and to keep them from tangling with each other while they're in storage. That one's a great scrap buster too because it doesn't take a lot of fabric. The next one is an eyeglass case, and I'm chuckling a little bit to myself because my mother went to a local bazaar in her town probably 30 years ago. It was a long time ago. And she bought these glasses cases that were actually sized and designed so that you could slip 2 pairs of glasses in them. So you could slip a pair of sunglasses and a pair of cheaters in. You didn't have to use both sides. You could just use one side. But I love them. I loved them so much, and she loved hers so much that when they wore out, she asked me if I could reverse engineer them. So I did, because I've never seen a pattern for them anywhere. And please don't ask me. I haven't written up a pattern for them. I made one for me and one for her. But there are lots of other great eyeglass case patterns out there on the internet. So if that's something that you or a family member need or a friend need, definitely eyeglass cases are on the list. Mug rugs are a fun and useful item, and they give you an opportunity again to use up scraps, practice your binding perhaps, or practice your quilting, maybe practice your embroidery. You could make embroidered mug rugs. And for the tea drinkers in your life, they are great presents, or coffee drinkers. You could also make fabric coasters. I've seen some embroidered for putting under wine glasses. I've seen a really clever pattern that's almost like origami, where there are 4 sections that kind of open up and you slip the base of your wine glass into them, and it holds your wine glass and collects any condensation. Another one for your tea-loving friends would be a tea caddy. We made a tea caddy in one of the embroidery classes that I took at Bernina University in 2025. It doesn't have to be embroidered, but again, that's a great way to practice your skills. I love this next one because I have several large lavender hedgerows in my garden for the pollinators. So I have a lot of lavender, and a lavender eye pillow would be a very luxurious gift for a special friend. Lavender sachets would be another idea. I have a friend who scours thrift stores and estate sales for vintage handkerchiefs, and she makes lavender sachets out of them and sells them at our co-op sale. You could also make just a plain sleep mask. I know people who swear by those, so they would be easy to put together too. The pet lovers in your life might like a pet bandana. And again, if you can customize with embroidery or applique or other kinds of details, these can be really special gifts. Sewists don't ever have enough pincushions, and how nice is it if you're a sewist to get a gift that you could make yourself, but someone else was thoughtful enough to make it for you? I love pincushions. I have them all over my house. We're going to talk about scrap-friendly gifts now, and again, as I said, there's some overlap. A lot of these could be considered quick gifts. A lot of the quick gifts could be considered scrap-friendly gifts. But here's a way to use up maybe some of those leftover units that didn't make it into a quilt, or pieces that really aren't big enough to put back into your stash, but you don't want to get rid of them or throw them out. So here's some ideas for scrap-friendly gifts. Patchwork throw pillows. If you know the decorating scheme of a particular friend and think that they might like a patchwork pillow, that would be a great way to use up some scraps, or maybe make a large quilt block and turn that into a pillow for them. You could make bowl cozies. My husband absolutely loves bowl cozies, especially in the winter when I make soup. He likes to get his bowl of soup and put it in a bowl cozy and sit there and enjoy a warm meal on a cold winter night. So I try to keep a fair number of bowl cozies around and just rotate through them and wash them as needed. They are also a great way to use up batting scraps. When my friend Dina was here a few weeks ago, I took a huge bag of batting scraps over to her because she loves to make bowl cozies. Pencil pouches use up small amounts of fabric. If you're a bag maker and you maybe have some leftover zipper tape that you purchased as yardage, and maybe you don't have enough for a bag, but you have enough for a little zipper pouch, really, any kind of zipper pouch is going to be incredibly useful. You can make quilted zipper pouches, you can make applique zipper pouches, you can make embroidered zipper pouches, you can make patchwork zipper pouches. If you're not afraid of zippers, zipper pouches are absolutely wonderful. They are some of the most popular gifts at our co-op's gift exchange every Christmas. Another scrap-friendly idea is to make doll clothes. My mother made clothing for our Barbie dolls when my sister and I were little, and we had some of the swankiest dressed Barbie dolls that you have ever seen. I know that as a garment sewist, sometimes I struggle to figure out what to do with those leftover pieces of garment fabric. If I'm not using them as pocket linings or other things, this would be a great way to use those pieces up. If you're concerned about plastic use, reusable snack bags or sandwich bags are great. If you don't mind making a little bit of a mess, those beeswax wraps are fabulous. Journal covers, that's a lovely gift if you make a cover and buy an inexpensive journal to go with it. Little soft toys or plushies are good gifts. My sister used to have several cats, and every so often she would ask me to make them some catnip mice, which were just little mice-shaped fabric bags filled with polyfill and catnip. And then I would sew the tiny opening closed. And her cats absolutely love those things. They played with them all the time. The homesteading group that I belong to does a Christmas exchange every year, and it was just announced this week that they were opening it up for people who wanted to participate. So I went and signed up. So I may be making a Christmas stocking to put all of my recipients' goodies in. I've seen lots of patterns out there for fabric baskets, large and small. You can get as fancy as you'd like. And like zipper pouches, these are also incredibly useful. Let's move on and talk about batch sewing gifts. And I'm probably going to draw pretty heavily on my knowledge of what things sell really well at our co-op sale. And when I talk about batch sewing, this could be you batch cut a lot of them at once and then sew them one at a time, or you batch cut them and batch sew them. So there's a lot of different ways to arrange your workflow here. Reusable gift bags are so practical. I actually have a friend who never seems to have wrapping paper on hand, but she has a lot of fabric. So if she needs to wrap a gift, especially for a fellow sewist, she will just take a piece of fabric, a remnant or something, and cut an appropriate sized piece out of it and wrap the present in it and tie it with a lovely bow. And that way the recipient has a piece of fabric that they can do something with. But if you're giving it to someone who doesn't sew, you might want to turn it into a bag first. Along those same lines, I've talked about the drawstring bags that I make myself to hold my underwear and socks in my suitcase when I'm traveling, because I like to keep clean and dirty organized. And my sister also asked for some drawstring bags for her shoes for when she travels. So drawstring bags of a particular size have a lot of use, not only for travelers, but also as produce bags or project bags, or anytime you need a bag that you can close quickly. The next one is one of my favorite gifts to make, and that's cloth napkins. I make two kinds. I either make some with a simple hem, or I make some with a rolled hem that I do on my serger. And those are especially nice in linen. My younger daughter, about 2 years ago, said that she didn't want to pay $80 for a set of 4 linen napkins. And I said, no, you shouldn't, because your mother can make you some. And for about $80, I got enough linen fabric in, I think, 6 or 8 different colors, because that's what she wanted, to make both her and her sister a set of napkins with rolled hem edges. And I still have fabric left over. I could make probably 2 more sets of napkins. There are patterns out there for napkins that have a self-faced hem on them. It's a bit hard to describe, but you make the back a little bit larger than the front, and you miter the corners so that when you turn it inside out, the back comes around to the front and makes a nice little edging on it. When I do my rolled hem napkins on the serger, I like to use Wonderfill Soft Lock, which is a woolly polyester thread. I like to use that in the looper, and I also will, as I'm serging the edge, I will lay a piece of water-soluble stabilizer on top of the fabric as it's feeding into the serger, and that helps to neaten the edge and keep those little whiskers from popping through. Placemats are one of the most popular items at our co-op sale. One thing I would caution you is find out how many settings your recipient needs. We had someone who was making placemats for our co-op sale, and she was making them in sets of 4 because that's probably the most popular size. But several people came in looking for sets of 6 or even 8. So it's nice when you can make as many for your recipient as they have place settings. And the opportunities for creativity on placemats it's endless. One thing that I need to make a few more of, because when we had them, we used them constantly, was bowl covers. And these are basically just large circles of fabric with elastic, probably like 1/4-inch elastic, sewn around the outside edge, or maybe 1 inch from the edge if you want to make it fancy. And they just slip over your bowls, and they're a great alternative to plastic wrap. If you can find a food-safe material like a food-safe PUL or a food-safe vinyl, you could make them out of that too. Market bags and small tote bags, especially the kind that you can fold up and throw into your purse. Those make wonderful gifts. I know that when I travel to see my kids, I have to take a stack of bags with me because Washington State charges for bags, and a lot of stores just don't even offer bags or carry bags anymore. So if you purchase something in Washington State, a lot of times you have to have a way to haul it out of the store. So those little roll up or the kind that tuck into little bags, market bags and produce bags that you can throw in your purse, those are absolutely wonderful. If you want an alternative to a heating pad, those rice-filled bags or flax-filled bags make wonderful presents because who doesn't need to have a warm hug around their shoulders, especially after a long day at work? And these are the ones that you just throw in the microwave and heat up for maybe 30 seconds. I like them when they're made out of flannel, but you can use quilting cotton. I'm not sure I would use minky. I don't know how well that microwaves, but certainly flannel and cotton are good choices. Infinity scarves or decorative scarves this is another place where you can use up those garment fabrics, especially because garment fabrics are usually 54 or 56 inches wide. So you get a little bit more fabric than you would with a narrower piece. I've done simple rolled edges on chiffon or sheer fabrics, and those make wonderful scarves. You can use flannel, you can use minky, you can use flannel and minky. There are lots and lots and lots of patterns out there for all kinds of scarves. Potholders are another great batch sewing item, and the way I like to do mine is that I take large remnants, so maybe a little bit less than just a little bit less than a yard, and I use my larger pieces of leftover batting, and I make a quilt sandwich, and I quilt it on my Q20, and then I cut the piece into 9-inch squares, and I bind them. And I can knock out a stack of 8 or 10 potholders in one afternoon doing it that way. I usually use one layer of batting and a layer of Insulbrite. If you cut them a little bit larger, like 14 by 18, you can make casserole potholders, or a casserole trivet. So it's a quilted piece that's large enough to sit under a 9 by 13 casserole dish and keep it from harming your kitchen table. One thing I keep saying I'm going to make, because I could always use more of these, and I have all of the supplies, is to take cotton webbing and sew a strip of fabric to it. So you turn under the long edges of the fabric so that you don't have any raw edges showing. That's a tongue twister. And then you top stitch the piece of fabric to the cotton webbing and cut it into lengths of, maybe 4 inches, or not 4 inches, cut it into lengths of 8 inches so that when it's folded in half, it makes a loop that can fit around your hands and your wrist. And I have small hands, so it might need to be a little bit longer than that. I don't know the exact dimensions. But then you get the key fob hardware, and what you do is you insert the raw ends of the webbing into the key fob hardware and clamp it down, and you've got a keychain that fits over your wrist. You can do it with plain fabric if you don't have the webbing. You can do it with waxed fabric. And speaking of waxed fabric lunch bags with a little simple loop closure or a Velcro closure, those are very popular co-op sale items. Okay, let's talk about those weekend projects. These are the ones that are a little bit more involved, and you might reserve these for the very special people in your life, maybe your family members or dear friends. Again, depending on how fancy you want to make these, you can make zippered makeup pouches, or you could make zippered sewing tool pouches, or I'm thinking of the Bianni patterns like runs with scissors or things like that. Those boxy toiletry bags make great gifts for men, especially if you make them out of waxed canvas, because that looks nice and masculine. Basic crossbody bags or phone holder bags, maybe a crossbody water bottle bag. I keep thinking I need to make one of those for myself. How about some aprons? There are so many styles of aprons, so many kinds of patterns. It helps if you know your recipient's preferred style, but you can go nuts. You can make patchwork ones, you can make plain ones, you can make reversible ones, you can make embroidered ones. Aprons are always useful, especially for people who cook. How about some oven mitts? I'm not one to use oven mitts. I really prefer potholders, but my daughters love their oven mitts. And I know AccuQuilt had an oven mitt die at one time. I don't know if it's still available, but oven mitts would be a great present. If you know someone who is always taking casseroles to church potlucks or other kinds of gatherings, then you might want to make a casserole carrier. How about a tablet sleeve for a Kindle or a thin laptop or an iPad? I know Gail Yellen has a pattern for one that she does. She uses the cover stitch and the serger to embellish the outside of the tablet cover. A fun one for families is to make everybody a pair of pajama pants so that they all match. And if you can get the sizes available, then this is a great one. And even if you haven't done much garment sewing, pajama pants are very forgiving. They're usually elastic waist pull-on pants, and they're fairly roomy, so they don't require a lot of fitting. How about fleece hats or neck warmers? Beanies? I made a lot of beanies using leftover sweater knits and leftover fleece. When I sew with those, the leftovers usually become beanies or hats of some sort. Those of you who are quilters might want to make table runners or a table runner and a placemat set, small lap quilts, wall hangings, tree skirts. All of those can be quilted, and all of those make wonderful presents, especially if you can personalize them in some way for the recipient. I don't have any grandchildren yet, but I think that when I do, one of the projects that I'm going to be making is an advent calendar, because I remember how much fun advent calendars were when I was a little girl, and I want to make sure that my littles have that same experience. This is by no means an exhaustive list, and I'd love to hear if you have some favorite gift items that you like to make for friends and family. You can email me because I love feedback. It's always welcome. You can email me at janet@janetzabo.com. I'm a little behind on reading emails right now because of my summer schedule, but I promise I will get to them. You can leave a comment on the show notes page at the podcast website, which is www.thestraightstitchpodcast.com. You can use the fan mail feature. I am on Instagram, or the podcast is on Instagram. I don't always see Instagram notifications, though. So if you want a quicker response, it's probably better to use fan mail or email me. But on Instagram, we're under Straight Stitch Podcast. My website is www.janetzabo.com, and that has links to my Big Sky Knitting Designs website, as well as the podcast website and my blog, where I put up pictures of my sewing when I'm actually sewing. This week, there were a lot of flower pictures from my herb garden because I have a lot of flowers blooming right now, and they're very pretty. So I think that will wrap it up for this week's episode. As I said, there probably won't be an episode next week because I'm going to be getting up and having to be at the church at 5 a.m. every morning to start cooking. So I won't have time to post the podcast, let alone record it. But after that, I should be getting back to a fairly regular podcasting schedule. So until the next episode, I hope you have a great couple of weeks and that you get to go sew something.